So welcome guys and welcome everybody. Congratulations on your resilience for turning up after lunch on Thursday. It's been a big conference for everyone so far. My name's Simon Pelletier. I'm a partner at Oliver Wyman. You can probably pick up from my accent. I'm not from here. I'm visiting from Sydney in Australia, visiting with some clients and also on a learning binge. And privileged to be here with a very cool panel to talk about ChatGPT and generative AI in insurance, reality or hype, or kind of what's happening, what's next, and how to prepare. It's obviously a topic which has had no shortage of coverage from both a content and a conversation perspective across the conference so far. There's been a lot of repetitions on this. So what I'm hoping with a panel of this quality is that we can start to drive the conversation down really into some of the practical components of both use cases, also preparation and how people are responding to the changing regulatory environment that we're seeing at the moment. As part of that, it would be fantastic if we could hear from you on the floor about your specific questions, either to any specific members of the panel or to the panel as a whole. So start to prepare those as we go through, and I'll give you a little bit of warning when we're coming to that. To get us started, I wanted to sort of work through some introductions of the panel, hear a little bit about their respective organisations, and probably start with a question of how you're actually dealing with this sort of technology in applications in your business or in interactions in your ecosystem at the moment. I wanted to start with Dr. Dave Rengachari, who's SVP and Head of Underwriting for Life Markets at RGA here in America. He's also Chair of the Risk Selection or Risk Categorization Committee for the Life Insurance Council of the United States. So thank you very much for being here, Dave. So how are you at RGA looking into use cases or deploying this at the moment?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, needless to say, as reinsurer, then our perspective is going to be twofold or threefold, right? So number one, it's that view across the carrier landscape and really understanding their views and their approach and how we could potentially complement that. And then the second, and some of this is a little bit more specific to RGA and where we play in the reinsurance underwriting market, but that relates to our roadmap. And our roadmap has already taken a strong pivot and evolution in just the last couple of years, where in a short period of time we have moved from a primarily facultative underwriter to being much more in direct support of the underwriting operations of carriers, whether that's through some of our strategic underwriting programs or Aura. But at the end of the day, I think where we are seeing carriers kind of make branch points and getting to decisions quickly around where they see themselves right now using the technology. So the first kind of branch point that we are seeing is just kind of a yes, no, we are ready to explore the technology as a whole. Then that next branch point, if you get to a yes, that we are seeing is, are you interested or willing to look at that use case in the underwriting space, or are you keeping things outside of underwriting into marketing or that type of areas? That's the second branch point that we are seeing. The third one, again, I'm underwriting focused. If you get to a yes on the underwriting, then the third branch point that we're seeing is around the decisioning. And so do you want ChatGPT and generative AI to be within the decisioning framework? And if so, how? Or do you want it to stay solely outside of the decisioning framework? And if you're going to do that, then the great majority of use cases that we're seeing are obviously around the efficiency plays there. So that's in general.
You bet. And an interesting conversation on that last branch around the role of the regulatory environment and how that's involved, and we'll get to that as we get through the conversation. Maybe Yuval next. Yuval, man, you're the CEO and co-founder of Digital Owl, with kind of medical document synthesis and the automation of these processes into, and I know you guys deal with RGA to a certain degree. Modern technology in data is kind of in your DNA. So tell us maybe a little bit about Digital Owl and also how you guys are applying this type of technology or thinking about it.
So we develop multiple AI engines. One of them is our own proprietary generative AI engine. And we use it mainly to understand medical records. So we help underwriters and claim adjusters in different line of business that are encountering a lot of medical information. And we're leveraging the AI to help underwriting and claim adjuster in a sense that the generative AI has the ability to understand and extract all the information and all the needed information from the medical record. And that allows carriers and other clients to gain a lot of efficiency, in a sense of, instead of spending time reading a lot of medical records, you can read a summary that was specifically tailored to your line of business, because part of the game is enhancing the data point we're extracting. And it also adds this layer of accuracy in this not really fair battle between people and machine, because people get bored and tired, and it's hard to read, medical information all day long. And they're also, you need to get your next case, so you have a lot of time limits. But the machine works really fast, and the machine doesn't get tired and bored. And the machine also understands a lot of the information that many or some users are not understanding. So improving accuracy helps with improving mortality slippage, with making the better decision. It can also affect reserve when you're managing claims better. And generative AI, I think it's the biggest game changer that we're seeing in the last, 25 years. And that can improve, streamline process in a way that a year ago was unable to do.
Yeah, so we can cross out hype and underline reality from you on the first set of questions.
Oh, yeah.
I want to come back because I did speak to one of your underwriting leads, JR, a little bit about some tests that you've run recently, but I think we're going to get down to that branch question of whether or not we're wanting to rely on this technology for decisions. Alex Duzet is the CEO of Pumpkin, one of the most innovative pet carriers in the United States, and also a deep thinker in this space. He just authored a fantastic article published on Forbes last week around multimodal AI and its role in interoperability. So thank you very much for being here, Alex. Maybe just tell everyone a little bit about Pumpkin, but also about how you guys are thinking about this in the pet insurance space.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the CEO of Pumpkin. We are pet healthcare insurance, so provide healthcare insurance for those dogs and cats. And we also have a wellness offering. So healthcare insurance is really for accident and illnesses. I think, who's got a pet here? Let's see a show of a hand. Okay, so most people. Who has pet insurance? Wow. Actually,
Aussies have more of it than
probably slightly better than the average population. But when you have a pet, it's not a matter of will they get sick? It's a question of when and how severe it's going to be, right? So insurance helps to provide the resource to pay for the care when they get sick. There's also routine care that you need to do. That can really be insured. So we have a wellness offering, and that's a non-insurance product, non-regulated, that we provide reimbursement for our pets. That's really to cover your standard routine. So you're supposed to do doing vaccines every year, or wellness visits. You're supposed to do maybe doing a blood test or pickle test, heartworm test. So we provide reimbursement for that. So for us, when we looked at AI, because kind of similar to your situation, we have to look at the medical records to make a decision, or yes, no, we pay the claim or not. So we have to recruit people from the medical industry. So we usually recruit former technicians that have worked in the field of medicine for about 10 years to come and do the adjusting. Up until very recently, everything that we did was manual, and there's some challenge with that in terms of time, accuracy, and scalability. So we've started to look at AI and say, how can we use this to automate some of our claim? One of the first use cases that we found that was interesting for us is on the wellness side, because it's actually a easier problem statement to tackle. And we found an actually very interesting, unique approach by using a pretty standard version of a transformer model to basically interpret the line items from extraction from the invoice, and to basically feed into our model to make a yes/no decision, do we pay the claim or not.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great insight. Thank you. Eugenia, thank you for being here. You're a partner at Plug and Play. You're a VC and a platform, and you look at a lot of insurtech across the market. The numbers you told me were exhausting to listen to. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the way you're thinking about your portfolio. I know Digital Owl are part of that portfolio, and you've been in that organization. And I've got a follow-up question to that, but just briefly an introduction to Plug and Play and how you're seeing the space.
Yeah, of course, thank you. So Plug and Play is the world's largest corporate innovation platform. We have over 550 corporate partners. Think of companies like Panasonic, Nintendo, PepsiCo, Progressive, you name it. And we help these folks get access to entrepreneurs, talent entrepreneurs like Yuval. Unfortunately, Yuval is not part of our portfolio. He went through one of our programs. It's one of the anti-portfolio, the misses we have to endure.
We can talk about it later.
We can talk. It's a problem that we can fix, fortunately. So to your point, Simon, I think we're seeing a lot of folks actually get very, very excited on the corporate side about what's happening with generative AI. And the main component is what is actually generative AI versus what's demo AI. And we try to help them navigate this ecosystem of new vendors and startups that are coming out and help them to identify the companies that are actually doing something. Because we're seeing two things mainly. One is people to actually do something interesting in generative AI, you have to have something that's proprietary to you. We're seeing a lot of ChatGPT wrappers basically getting wiped out by the now so-called incumbents, I would say, like Cohere, Anthropic, OpenAI, Mistral, and all these companies that have large language models that are building new features and all the marketing tools that were the first ones to come to market that are raising exorbitant amounts of money have already been doing layoffs. And we help these large enterprises on the insurance side trying to figure out which are the companies that do have something proprietary, whether it's on the pet side or on the medical record side, and so on, to gain an edge and stay competitive.
Yeah.
It's tough out there. It's
Yeah,
evolving very fast.
I bet there's a lot to sift through. No doubt that if you were to compare the number of meetings that had either in the title or the byline Gen AI at the moment, the number's a lot higher than it was 12 months ago. What about, just for everyone's sake, where's the needle on the last 3 months? Is that starting to deteriorate, or are we still on the uptick in terms of how much you're seeing?
Yeah, it's very much on the uptick still. I think, if anything, all the startups that I met throughout the last 2 or 3 days, they're probably all doing something around AI, even though some companies around payments are even doing something around AI and probably don't need them. I think we're going to see some of it go away. We tend to see these cycles come out every now and then. I think 2 years ago it was blockchain, 5 years ago it was blockchain as well, and it comes and goes. And some time ago it was everything about IoT sensors and devices, and maybe we can chat about that and what's new this time around. But I think everyone's trying to piggyback on that wave because public markets, private markets have been severely beaten, and everyone is trying to get into the next the next hot thing, basically.
You bet. So Gen AI on IoT on the blockchain, and you're going to take the meeting if I send you the email.
That's a lot of buzzwords for sure. Yeah.
I wanted to start to move the conversation a little bit to sort of getting ready and what's next, and noting that we've sort of got a mix of startups and service providers and also sort of incumbent carriers here. Dave, just starting with you, there's one part of the conversation which there's definitely not been alignment on around the conference so far is within sort of larger organizations, how should you configure to start this piece? So I had the CEO, John Hancock, yesterday was really, really specific. This has to be controlled and centralized. I need to control both the enterprise risk profile of the use cases that I'm deploying. I'm super worried about the computational cost blowing out over time if I start to deploy different tooling across my organization. So I'm centralized, I'm heavily controlled, and I'm 1 or 2 high impact use cases. And on the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing people starting to invest in just getting sandbox capability, spread it out because I want to experiment and prototype as quickly as possible. Where do you sit?
Yeah, I certainly can't answer for the industry or even necessarily carriers. I can begin to touch upon, how our approach is evolving. I think your comment from the Hancock CEO, I think certainly rings true when it comes down to establishing the guardrails within the company. I mean, it needs to say, absolutely, that's the type of thing that makes sense to occur at the enterprise and framework level and be consistent across the use cases of the technology. Beyond that, for us as a primary life and health reinsurer, then the question comes down whether that use case, the big branch point is whether that use case needs to be medically aware versus those that do not need to be medically aware. We are finding that the people that can do medically aware well really shrinks the world quite dramatically there, and that's where there may be a need, if you will, to frankly pay a premium, right, to compare to what if it would be in many cases, it's something where something more off the shelf can be applicable to those things that are not, especially for our uses, they are requiring that degree of medical awareness. I think your second point is also, again, I'll just sort of frame how we are beginning to view it, and that is kind of that sandbox versus core competency approach. Our approach has been to certainly focus on core competency, and for us, core competency relates to underwriting. And again, I think the reasons should be intuitive. Number one is that's where we see us potentially providing value to the carriers. In other words, and we had this conversation earlier today, again, being very frank, our subject matter expertise to carriers is not going to be around how do you, design a financial advisor chatbot, right? As a reinsurer. I think we're going to bring that expertise around underwriting. But the second piece of that, again, being very frank and very, very transparent, in today's budget and expense world, just looking towards that need to demonstrate internally ROI sooner rather than later to get to impact and scale. We don't think we're going to be able to do that by sandboxing. Of course, there's going to be sandboxing within the core competency, but to get to impact and scale, we're focusing on underwriting.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you. Alex, I guess that kind of goes to one of the questions around tooling as well within that. There's a point of departure or a branch across the whole conversation so far about using open applications to build these, and you would have thought at some stage the broader industry is going to solve for the data privacy and all the concerns that incumbents have there versus closed applications and building proprietary. How have you approached it so far, and what do you see happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the view is, especially on the tool, is like, in some way, I would say the technology is almost like a commodity, right? The real value add is in the data sets. And when you look at the big companies that really are the innovator on generative AI, like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, they mostly rely on the open web and open information, right? When you look at people like us, we deal in the world of like animal health, and healthcare, and you have probably the similar problem statement in human health. There you still start to see like silos. The data is not publicly available, and no one has access to all the information, right? And it's an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. I think one thing we're trying to be thoughtful is not to never really like call an OpenAI, an API with like OpenAI or anybody else, because like we don't want to start as an industry giving all our precious data into those players, because then we are at their mercy. On the flip side, it's in silos, and we're trying to think through like how can we as an industry create maybe a common player where we pull our data into it and then leverage the service that we create, because we can deliver amazing experience for, and there's a use case on both sides, the enterprise side as well as the user and the consumer. Yeah,
interesting. And Yuval, I'm pretty sure that's got applications in your context, right? So I guess a couple part question, but if you think about the role of kind of supersized players and providing these platforms and services into the clients that you're facing versus a specialist player like yourself. How do you think that plays out over the next little bit? How are you thinking about it from a digital owl perspective?
So obviously the access to data is a key, has a key role. So we tag manually hundreds of thousands of pages for our NLP engine, and we already train our Gen AI on tens of thousands of questions. But I think something really important to understand is that those really big companies that develop those amazingly awesome off-the-shelf engines are developing an engine that is more general in the sense that he will be able to react to different use cases, from marketing to, I don't know, how can you please plan me a trip to New York, to multiple different questions. And if you want to write a blog post about the best top 10 method to train your dog to sit, then probably you don't need it to be academically accurate, and you can use those kind of engines. But if you want to underwrite a life policy, or if you want to analyze a workers' comp claim, suddenly you do need it to be really, really sophisticated and aligned and trained to the complexity of your work. And I think this is the probably the powerful thing with insurtech companies, where we are working on a really specific range of use cases, and we put a lot of efforts. When I say a lot, we have 40 people just training engines on medical and medical related to insurance questions and topic. And it's extremely important to end user to read the output of the Gen AI and to be able to have confidence in it, that he reviewed all the things that they need to review, and it's not just a high-level general output.
Yeah. Eugenio, do you believe that? Is the specificity of the output something that has to be trained? And if so, does then the long tail of the use cases just need so much human overlay that the return model blows out for you and you're not interested? I mean, how do you judge off those two impacts?
Yeah, well, it's a good question because there are trade-offs in both, right? But I think I agree with Yuval's point of you need specificity for certain things. You can't just have an off-the-shelf model to do something like an underwriting for a life policy. When dealing with personal information, you just can't do it. You don't want to upload that into ChatGPT and try to get an outcome out of that, right? But it's difficult. I mean, from an investor standpoint, it's very complicated to try to understand which is the next company that's going to accrue the most amount of value if most of these large foundation models can do a lot of it with a fairly good degree of accuracy versus a proprietary model. But sometimes what gets you from 90% to 99% is going to make the whole difference, right?
Yeah.
And getting from 99 to 99.9%, it's actually what's going to be winning in specific use cases. So to that point, I think, yes, you need to have, and I think Alex and Yuval have alluded to this, a model that has something pretty unique to win. Or on the other hand, you're building something like a foundation model that can accrue most of the value out there. And that's why you're seeing the open AIs of the world becoming so big in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. If I can jump into I think there's an element that I think is important to clarify, because we talk about generative AI, right? Generative AI is about the technology that really helps to create content, right? You do give it a prompt, and then based on the model, these 2D vector models, it looks at the relationship between words and say, oh, I can give you an answer, right? But what you talked about before, underwriting, or in our case, or pretty much everybody in this room who's dealing with insurance, you're looking at claims, right? What you're looking for is a decision and output that optimizes for an outcome, right? There's a branch of machine learning that's actually not getting a ton of publicity right now, but it's actually key to what we're doing, which is actually different from generative AI, is reinforcement learning, right? Because if I want to look at, either loss ratio or the lifetime value of one of my users, I also wanted the agent to make a decision not just on one use case, but on multiple. For instance, in the world of pet insurance, it's very different than another line of insurance. If I have 100 policies today, over the next 12 months, I'm going to get 170 claims, right? So I get 1.7 claims per year per pets, right? And an average pet lives, 12, 13, 14 years. We underwrite most people under the age of 4, so you can look at a 10-year cycle. So I'm going to get maybe, 17 claims per pet. I want a tool that helps to think through how do you optimize for the right decision, not just based on information I have today, but I want to optimize over the lifetime value of that pet and that pet owner. And that's a very different approach. It's another branch of machine learning, but it's not getting a ton of attention. It's actually a little more complex. And those you cannot take any kind of off-the-shelf tools. You have to build a proprietary data set. And you also need very large data sets to be able to train the model and retrain the model.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I think one of the open questions is how we build people and training uplift to learn the science of prompting and managing these engines is going to be part of winning from an incumbency perspective. Just to flag folks on the floor, if you want to get ready with any questions you have for the panel. I did want to go, it's topic de rigueur this week. We've got a very strange cast with Elon Musk, Kamala Harris, Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, getting together in London with a bunch of other Valley CEOs on an AI safety summit. And President Biden issued an executive order early in the week to look at some sort of comparative testing and guardrails and those to be developed. So regulations coming at us. at the same time as you guys are talking about accuracy starting to press us in from co-piloting into making decisions. So kind of a two-part question, Dave, with your role in the industry context, I'm really interested to start with you. Firstly, has regulation or fear of regulation been a blocker to progress for you at RGA? And then the second part is, what are your sort of hopes and aspirations that come out of this new focus on regulation in this space at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know if you would describe it as a blocker or just more, just more frankly, just a lot of thought and conversation around how to be proactive in the approach and the messaging and the engagement. So one of the things that I feel as though we need to be very proactive and very clear about is that distinction between generative AI and AI. I think part of the problem is that the definition of generative AI is so loose, and we talk about generative AI being defined by the ability to generate content, which I believe. But I also believe that content really should be true new content, text, audio, what have you. I think if we start defining generative AI as producing the decision, I personally don't count that as true generative AI.
Right.
I count that as just AI there. And that regulation work stream is well down the pathway. I also think we need to be very clear and consistent, if we are talking about generative AI, then around whether we are really using that to make the decision, which I think there's going to be a very, very high regulatory bar, with how we are seeing carriers really articulate where they find the value, which is actually not in generating the decision, but it's in generating efficiencies to get to that decision. I know that sounds like a slight decision, but it's really quite real, right? So with underwriters synthesizing multiple sources of information to find the right place in the underwriting manual, that's where we're providing the efficiencies, but also then sourcing where we found that information. I think that's the right pathway.
Right. Yeah, and Yuval, as you look at this activity, how are you thinking about it as a potential enabler or an inhibitor of your business model?
Regulation?
Yeah.
Don't get me started. I can say that, especially for the insurance industry, there is an important to solve two main issues with Gen AI. The first is hallucination, and the second is black box. And if you are able to do it, especially black box, so you can actually read the output and track back to the source document, and then you can make decision. Think about life underwriting. The decision you are making is based on the manual, but using the Gen AI just to extract the information, I don't think there is a regulatory issue here. And I think it will also be very beneficial for the policyholder, in the sense that if you can improve efficiency, then maybe you can also reduce prices, and it will be a really good thing for the entire industry.
Yeah.
One thing that makes me a little bit uneasy with the regulation is, and obviously I agree, like this is a new field that it could go into many ways, and there's all kinds of use cases that could be bad. But one thing that really kind of strikes me unusual is, and I've been part of sort of Silicon Valley for over 20 years. Silicon Valley does not like regulation. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Sam Altman, they don't like regulation. And then suddenly you're looking at them going in front of Congress, talking about, yes, absolutely, you need to regulate us. They're all for regulation. And I think you want to question the motive, right? There was a phenomenal talk given by a great venture capitalist, Bill Gurley, but 6 weeks ago in LA at the All-In Summit. It's called Regulatory Capture, right? And I think that's one thing that makes me nervous, is that they're inviting to be regulated, but they want to participate on defining the regulations so that they can protect themselves and their own interest and lock everybody else out, right? That's a dangerous, slippery slope. Obviously there needs to be room for regulation. I'm concerned that personally on the other side, on the framework, you don't have people who have enough expertise to truly understand, to go toe-to-toe with those guys, to strike the right balance of where do we create regulation, where do we protect the public, where we don't stall innovation either, right? Because there's a lot of positive use case coming out of AI, and it's got to be handled like the right way.
I'm sure there's some allegories from the pharmaceutical industry on regulatory capture. So if we've got any questions from the floor, now's the time. So there's none through on the app. Is anybody got any questions? You want to put your hand up? It's a quiet room. I'm sure we'll hear you. Yes, sir, please. Thank you.
You're looking toward me, and I'll answer it by just maybe saying the opposite of intuitive. I would err on the side of disclosure. There, I think many people saw the executive order that came out recently, and a function of that was essentially a watermark around that. I have a feeling that that's going to become exceedingly common. They're almost like the accept cookies, kind of button. But I'm seeing overall, just a little downside in being forthright that was a component of the technology, which should go right alongside with probably the more important element, which is what was used to generate that AI, which gets back to being able to link to the source data or information.
There's an interesting way around hallucinations right now by building a fail-safe. So you'll basically prompt a model to give you an output, and that output basically has to go through another loop. Alex alluded to reinforcement learning, where that output needs to be verified against some information or data, and it's more of an if-then statement than if it complies with this other set of data, then it can actually go through. And you build this sort of fail-safe to prevent those hallucinations where there's something too egregious that you probably are going to get yourself in trouble. But that's basically a workaround on what the actual outputs are. But funny enough, a lot of people are seeing sort of a degradation in what the answers are coming out of all these models, because they get retrained on a lot of the answers that they're providing themselves. So it's like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. The last one is pretty much gray, and you can't really understand what was in the original one. That's also starting to happen, and it's really kind of affecting the way that all of these models behave as well.
I can share a little bit about what we do, for example. So I think the magic lies in a combination of set of technologies. So when we use Gen AI to extract information or to generate a summary of a medical record, we also use a very powerful proprietary entity extraction engine that will extract all the entities from the source document, and then will extract all the data point from the generative AI output, and then do a comparison. And if the Gen AI output will include, cancer, but we never found any mention of cancer, when the entity extraction review the source document, we know there is hallucination here. So that allows us to eliminate a lot of the noise. And when there is a match, the entity extraction found hypertension in the output of the Gen AI and also hypertension in the source document. That allows us to link the two. And this is how you avoid the black box, in a sense that if you're reading the output, the summary, the paragraph that was generated by the Gen AI, everything is clickable, and you can click on the specific condition or procedure, and it will directly take you to the source document. And I think this is quite of a clever way to solve the hallucination and the black box issue.
So I think we're out of time for questions from the floor. I just want to get down a quick 30-second answer. I had sort of listed before I came over to ask what the impact of this technology was going to be over the next 3 years for your business. I don't think anybody knows that now, so maybe we'll scale that back to 12 to 18 months, starting with you, Alex. What's your kind of ambition for this technology in the context of Pumpkin over the next 12, 18 months?
Yeah, I think, if I look back the last 12 months, we've been over like LLM, mostly generative AI on text. I think the next 12 months is really about like multimodal. So we go from LLM to like LMM, like large multimodal models, right? And looking really like at output inputs that can be text, video, code, words, and really create an experience and solve some use case. So for us, one thing we're interested into is we know in the world of like veterinary medicine, there's a tremendous amount of error rates. I heard studies that could as high somewhere between 30 to 60% of image diagnostics, like X-rays, can be misinterpreted by a DVM, right? And the challenge that you have is you have pets on the other side who are on the receiving end of that misdiagnosis, they can talk. So I was a personal user of this. I had a situation a year ago with my dog that we did an X-ray for dental cleaning. They didn't pick up on a condition that's developing, and then 4 weeks later, my dog had like a tennis ball in her face, and we had to do an emergency surgery for that. I think that you can solve that through multimodal AI by having, as opposed to a human being, an agent that makes a decision, read the documents, and then is a co-pilot for the veterinarians. Right? Yeah. They can decide to override the recommendation, but yeah, I think it can really solve some problems.
LMM. You've also 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll make it really short. I think we will start seeing underwriters and claim adjuster leveraging the ability to chat with the Gen AI, and it will be similar. Imagine it's like interviewing the physician, or even having the smartest underwriter or claim adjuster next to you that you can chat with them, ask them questions about the case. It will be interesting.
Very cool. Dave?
Divide it into an obvious and less obvious category. The obvious category is every company out here has probably 1,000 use cases that they're talking about over the water cooler. So narrowing that down to what we want to tackle in the 18 to 24 and aligning it to our strategy, obvious. Not obvious, one of the things that we haven't talked about that generative AI, I think, is a really attractive thing outside of the efficiency piece is I believe it really democratizes the ability for users there of a different skill level to get insights from what we're doing. So just as an example, an underwriter may not be super comfortable. A lot of underwriters are not super comfortable running an Excel SQL, right? Yeah. But with generative AI, anyone can ask, when did this applicant have a double vision? So part of our goal then is to actually take advantage of that and get this tool out of the boardroom, and at least at some level have our underwriters and our case managers have some exposure to it.
That's really nice, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much to these panelists. Please thank them with me.